Well everyone, here we are, our first Patreon voted video. While we covered the majority of FromSoft's library long ago, huge fans of it as we are, we neglected Sekiro for quite some time. Why, you ask? Simply put, we both hated it when it came out. I made it up to the final boss but got filtered and rage quit after 3 hours of merciless one-sided beatings from Grandpa Yishin. Jack just generally lost interest halfway through, quitting at Senpu Temple. When it won the poll, we were both hesitant as to what to expect of our returns to Ashina, only for us both to be pleasantly surprised. While Jack didn't love it as much as the other games, he still liked it a good deal, and I had a great time myself. After slashing our way through countless soldiers, ghosts, and monkeys for some reason, we both have become quite adept at the game, which really does determine just how much you get out of it. With us both having completed 2 playthroughs in the name of fighting every boss, we've got plenty of data on which to base our rankings now. Before we get into things, I'd like to note that we aren't counting mini-bosses. As much as I like the Armored Warrior and think the Shichiman Warrior should be condemned to an eternity in the bowels of hell, we can't justify spending the first half of the video on 30-second segments on the 50 clones of General Yamaguchi Yojimbo Yamada of the 7 Spears Long Shadow Centipede or whatever. However boring it would be for you folks to watch that, I assure you it is even more boring to make. As well as that, we're not counting the inner bosses as their own things either. They're a smidge different, but not enough for their own slots. Lastly, no Great Serpent. Anyways, as always, thank you to our patrons who are eating well this week thanks to their voting powers. If you want to get in on things, now is a great time since our next game coverage poll is coming on the first day of March. With that out of the way, let's get into the rankings.
The Demon of Hatred. Fitting fucking name. Have you ever tried mixing peanut butter and tomato sauce? I haven't, and it sounds pretty fucking rancid, but at least it'd still mix together. Probably. I don't even really have a direct bridge to oil and water, but the long and short of it is that they do not mix, just like the Demon of Hatred and Sekiro's combat. This fight in this game are total polar opposites that feel slapped together for the fuck of it, and while it looks great visually, has a killer score and awesome lore, and to be honest isn't anywhere near fellow low-end bosses of FromSoft's other titles, holy shit is this fight bad. The Demon of Hatred was once the sculptor, who was once almost the Shura, who was once a shinobi, who, well anyways, after failing to become the Shura due to Ishin, he got consumed with rage, hatred, and bloodlust, only finding solace in working as a hermit sculptor for shinobi. By the endgame, however, the sculptor transforms into the Demon of Hatred, ravaging Ashina outskirts and potentially becoming a danger to the entirety of Ashina. And yeah, this guy does not fuck around. You need basically an arsenal of like nuclear warheads and maybe kryptonite or the Death Star or something for good measure to wipe out his generously gigantic health bar, of which there are 3 of. In Bloodborne, the Demon of Hatred would have been a joy to take out as the hunter, but as Wolf it's about as enjoyable as having an internal rectal scan on one end while getting the last dab XXX doused through a tube on the other, all while getting your head beat with a comically large meat mallet. An experience I'll never forget. Dodging and blocking is about as useful as a traffic cone on a bullet train railway, and running doesn't work when fighting a monster that feels bigger than that big fucker from God of War 3. Also, the story is cool and all, but the whole dude's so angry he transforms into a mesh of fire and blood orange and shit is a bit overdone for my taste. As it always goes, anytime anyone complains about a boss in a Souls game, you can smell the get good comments brewing in the uninventive, regurgitated comment factory from a mile away. So, let's state some facts. Shall we? While it's nothing special, I beat Great Shinobi Owl in 3 tries, Father Owl in 2, Headless Ape in 1, and just to piss on the flames, I also beat Ishin the Sword Saint on my 2nd attempt. All on my first blind run through the game. Hopefully Alex can insert the iMessage proof for Ishin, so suck it nerds. Needless to say, I think I'm pretty capable at this game, but for me, the Demon of Hatred just did not click. In fact, I was so fucking shocking at the fight that I figured, what better way to beat it than to cheese it? Haha. There are a bunch of guide videos on YouTube on how to pull this cheese off, and it's sort of hard to do, but yeah, it's funny for like 2 seconds, so there you have it. I think it's clear I do not enjoy this boss, and rightfully so, it earns the bottom place spot. Thanks for sacrificing it being higher up so I can rant, Alex. That's real brotherhood right there.
As esteemed philosopher Donkey Kong once wisely proclaimed, one is either a top banana or a chimp chump. Here's two apes who fit squarely into the latter classification. I don't outright dislike any bosses in this game, honestly, but this one is by far my favorite candidate for backing the list. While the headless ape is a great boss on its own, tossing in another ape just for the hell of it is thoughtless FromSoft gank design almost on par with the Grave Robber gang from Souls 2. It's not a huge roadblock in difficulty, especially considering that the lesser ape dies instantly if you throw enough sparklers in his face, but there is just no reason for this to exist. In Sekiro, they were smart enough to add a boss refight option as an awesome quality of life detail for boss fight lovers like yours truly, but this also makes boss refights totally pointless. Even the Dragon Rider duo in Souls 2 are defensible if you really like the Dragon Rider fight for some reason. I'm sure there's at least one guy out there who was like, holy shit dude, I get to fight these guys again, awesome! In Sekiro, anyone who wants to refight the Guardian Ape just has to finish the game and fight him at their leisure at an idol. It is inconceivable to me that someone would be refighting the Guardian Ape and in the middle of the second phase be like, man, this sucks, I wish there was another ape here or something. Who on earth did they think they were amusing with this fight? At least the first phase is pleasant. Deflecting that one mega strike from the headless ape is literally the most satisfying thing in the game, save for killing the final boss. I wouldn't be at all surprised if I learned that the sound it makes when you pull it off triggers the same neurons in your brain that activate when you shoot up heroin or lay pipe. A healthy alternative for any unfortunate viewers out there living like the guys from Trainspotting.
FromSoft aren't exactly masters of the art of making gimmick boss battles, and the folding screen monkeys are yet another failed attempt at one, but at least they're easy and sort of dumb as compared to some of the other, more offensive gimmicky failures. Each monkey works on a physical sense. Green has great hearing and poor vision, orange is missing his hearing and vision, white is invisible, and purple can't stand losing his green-ass partner, apparently. He also has good vision, I think, but he killed himself both times I've fought these guys, so take what you will from that. Anyways, your goal is to kill each one by one using mechanics laid around the arena, but there's a specific strategy to follow that finishes this whole thing in under a minute. So, does the gimmick even work? Well, kind of. I mean, you can play along, but it takes like 20 minutes if you do, so ultimately there's no real reason. The folding screen monkeys are a mechanical mess that fail at their one job, but still are an alright boss fight overall.
We're counting the two fights with the corrupted monks separately due to the additional phases in the true variant and the fact that the game counts them as different in the boss refight menu. I personally have much less love for the real deal thanks to the obnoxious second phase. Why does anyone ever think making a boss invulnerable for a long period of time and making you run around like a decapitated chicken a good idea? I long to meet the playtesters who keep encountering these situations in development and apparently giving it the thumbs up. These are clearly people who would summon the Xenobites from Hellraiser on purpose and spend their free time dangling their nutsacks and screw vices. You can skip this phase if you perform a plunging death blow on her right on a specific branch as the phase starts, but it's so awkward and finicky to pull off that it feels like a glitch more than an intended strategy. As for the third phase, it's basically the first phase but cooler. Unfortunately, at that point I just desperately want off the ride and don't give a flying fuck about fighting fair. By the time I'm through with her, she always has more ash in her lungs than a lifelong chain smoker. Besides the new eccentricities, there are a few general annoyances that I have with the fight. In what seems to be literally the only case in the game of its kind, she has one attack that is unblockable, but is not annotated by the unblockable kanji. It's a sweeping attack that comes from her left, which makes sense as to why it would hit you, I guess, but not marking it as such is stupid, frustrating bullshit. Imagine if we were playing rock, paper, scissors, and I had some kind of mental tick, where every time I was gonna choose rock, I did a weird squinty thing with my eyes. Then, one time, after 150 games unfailingly following this trend, after squinting, I suddenly kicked you in the nuts, walloped you in the head with a lead pipe, set you on fire, blasted 10 clips of a machine gun into your torso, and then used scissors. Totally cheap, right? Not a fan of this. In a shockingly ironic twist, the true corrupted monk is more of a cheap fraud than her astral projected single health bar clone.
Fuck yeah? I don't know, this fight could have been ridiculously good, but ended up falling flat, it being the first major boss and all. As Alex mentioned in the introduction, this was my first real playthrough of Sekiro. I don't remember much from my half-assed run of the game when I was 14, but I can say for sure that either I was incredibly unobservant, had a lower IQ than I do now, or both combined, because Gyobu Oniwa was strikingly easier than my young head memory remembered him to be. Surely Elden Ring and its weirdly large group of horseback bosses helped me a lot with this fight, but just knowing what was going on helps make Gyobu Oniwa really easy to be honest. As long as you stand in front or to the side of the horse it won't ever attack you, and from there just pay attention to Gyobu's movement and you're good as gold. I also recommend getting the grappling hook attack as he has a lot of openings for those as well. Gyobu Oniwa is a solid first boss, not particularly challenging but memorable nonetheless.
Old people really don't fuck around in this game. If you look at a list of the hardest bosses, literally all of them would be gumming down porridge and blood pressure meds in modern times. Lady Butterfly reminds me a bit of Aldrich if the fight was actually fair given the similar arena design and penchant for sending magic projectiles at you. She's not too tricky for me now, but back in the day she was serving me a heaping plate of whoop-ass for the better part of 2 hours, which I can respect. I think Sekiro, compared to all the other FromSoft games, save for maybe Elden Ring, has the steepest learning curve. Within an hour or two of your playthrough starting, heinously difficult shit is already being flung at you constantly, and by the time you're trading blows with Grandma, the land of Ashina probably has a dragon rot plague far worse than COVID ever became. I think that the arena here is probably my favorite looking one in the game, which is saying a lot since this game has a lot of amazing looking ones per FromSoft tradition. Lady Butterfly is quite versatile, being a master of illusions, kunai, and stomping on your toes really hard or something. I don't know, she's good at whatever it is she's trying to do here with that attack. She can also walk around on little threads she put everywhere like the homie Doflamingo, but a well-timed shuriken can send her tumbling on her ass for a beating. If you're smart, you'll spend the beginning of the second phase running marathons around the room and avoiding the little mist midget guys, but if you're a real badass, you just get up on her grill anyways. You can also use snap seeds, but let's be real, who the fuck actually uses these? They're useful in like 2 places in the entire game, and when you fight Lady Butterfly, you'll have no more than 5 on hand unless you've been stockpiling them for God knows why. If you're good enough at the game to beat her, you don't need them, and if you're not good enough at the game to beat her, you probably don't even think to try using them in the first place. It's sort of a catch-22. All in all, a solid early game benchmark of skill, but nowhere close to as cool as the other fight in this room.
I wouldn't call myself a fan of the Corrupted Monk, but I do like it more than Alex does. Although the 3-phase fight has very little evolution in my opinion, or at least good evolution, all the mechanics introduced in the true Corrupted Monk fight are pretty fucking dog shit. So, the shorter, simpler, and more basic variant wins out. I also think the illusion looks cooler. I really like the Mariki counter, and this is maybe the most satisfying boss to do it on. I also just love reflecting in general, and this is also your key to victory. The illusory Corrupted Monk is far less advanced than its real form, but that's maybe for the better.
This is a fight that most people can agree on. While it looks awesome, there are a litany of issues that keep it from hitting its stride. For starters, there's that whole first phase with the old dragons of the tree. What the hell are these things? Why am I fighting them? What does this 2-minute long waste of my time add to the encounter? These are some questions that may pop into your head, doubly so if you died to the dragon and had to do it all again before getting to the meat of the encounter. The answer to all of these questions is a resounding, I don't know. I just think of them as the dragon's groupies, who seem to universally share a love for playing the flute and vomiting. They'd fit right in at any party, at least me personally, I think that'd be pretty funny in real life. Anyways, once you've finished killing them all, the dragon shows up to rip off Ludwig and eat lightning bolts. It would have been nice if the dragon cared enough about his groupies to cry at their demise, but he doesn't really seem to give much of a shit, so you've just gotta go get that tear the hard way. There is very little to the fight from here. Enjoy zapping him to a crisp in the admittedly awesome finishing segment. I always thought gracious gift of tears was a slightly euphemistic way to phrase cutting open his eyelids and ripping them straight out of his tear ducts, but what do I know? I'm no expert on Japanese cultural customs, maybe that's just a thing they do over there. While the Divine Dragon is almost purely a set piece, it's admittedly a pretty good one, so he can still claw his way up here despite not being engaging gameplay-wise.
Alex put it best, countering the Guardian Ape is a feeling only laying wood can rival, and it is way better doing this without having to worry about Candy Kong tossing you into a wall at Mach 8. This fight is split into 2 distinct phases, the first actually being the same moveset as the female ape who joins in during the Headless Ape fight, another point to how much of a fucking mess that fight is. I'm personally not a huge fan of this phase, as the ape attacks sort of sporadically and a lot of the time it's fairly unclear what's going on for me, so I just spammed L1 and prayed that he wouldn't pummel me when he starts jumping around. After long enough you'll cut off his head, and I was thrilled when this happened, so much so that I texted Alex, He then promptly revived himself, but like a champ I still beat it on the same attempt with no healing gourds. I think the second headless phase is actually one of the best designed bosses in the game. His hitboxes are great, his tells are perfect, and if you really know your shit, you can even no damage him comfortably with enough practice. And also, all his big hitters are incontestably the best attacks to counter in the game, not just from a satisfaction point, but a game sense. They even reward you with a stun when you do so. The Guardian Ape kicks fucking ass. Thank the Lord whatever spin-off of Homo sapiens this is not around today.
No matter which way you roll with regards to the Iron Code question, all roads lead to Isshin Ashina. It's just a matter of whether he's a cracked out lightning god or not. While this version is definitely overshadowed by his more flashy counterpart, that's not to say it's any slouch either. Just because Isshin is a pruned old geezer hours away from dying of sickness doesn't mean he still can't lay down the law. Although luckily for Shura Wolf, he waits for you to kill Emma before stepping in for some reason. Emma is basically to Isshin what Genichiro is to the Sword Saint, a warm-up for the main event that you'll get through with solid deflecting. That said, she is way harder than Genichiro in my opinion. For one, she is the biggest harasser in the game when it comes to healing windows. If you ever dare to heal when she isn't doing something, she will fly across the entire fucking arena to finish you off, which is sort of annoying. As long as you don't ever wind up on the back foot, you'll take her down though, which admittedly feels pretty shitty considering she gave you all the healing gourds and seemed pretty chill. She was also raised by a monkey, apparently. That is pretty cool also. Anyways, Isshin is all about fire, the analog for hatred in this game. His second phase is pretty different from the first one, which makes it a bit of a pain to learn, but the way you dodge stuff is still kept mostly the same. The Ichimonji has to be the dumbest technique ever invented. Isshin is a little fraudulent for inventing that. Thanks for standing still and doing nothing with your back turned to me for 5 seconds, you senile old coot. I'm sure you can get a lot of mileage cutting sandwich crust with that move if you're lucky. You want to know what does work? Judgment cuts and putting fire everywhere. That's the stuff that really knocks me on my ass time in and time out. He also has the unique ability to dodge your swings sometimes, which I thought was a glitch or shitty hit reg until someone explained to me that it's just a thing he does. Despite all of this, he is still unable to beat Sekiro, condemning Japan to a death toll of, like, everyone. That's pretty crazy considering Wolf was doing it all personally with a sword as far as we know. I guess it's no wonder Isshin got packed, but at least he put up a good fight along the way.
Great Shinobi Owl is one of the game's emotional peaks. Listen as he has his heart broken, his own son betrays him, and he realizes he now needs to do what must be done to follow through on his master plan. Well, to be honest, I just sort of laughed during this cutscene when I replayed the game on English because I couldn't really get Darren DePaul's Reinhardt out of my head. It was like playing Asura's Wrath on Japanese and listening to August, who's voiced by the same guy who plays Joseph Joestar, taking his last few breaths, a total immersion breaker for me. Anyways, Great Shinobi Owl is fantastic. Owl is Wolf's adoptive father and a fellow master shinobi who actually uses a plethora of shinobi tricks during the fight, such as the Mariki counter and firecracker prosthetic. I'd argue Owl has the most fair moveset in the game, with a very even number of reflectable, undodgeable, and Mariki counterable attacks, as well as opportunities for you to go on the offensive occasionally. The second phase introduces a new half of Owl's moveset that works around invisibility and poison. In this phase I found it best to just D-lock from Owl and run away whenever he did an unnatural telegraphed move, and if you do this, as well as just time your reflex well, this phase doesn't feel insanely different. So, where does this initial encounter compare to Father Owl fought later in the Purification run? Well, this one we both would say is noticeably worse. The second fight's moveset is way more intense and just an overall improvement on this already awesome first duel. Still, the Great Shinobi Owl, even in his pre-peak state, is one of the best bosses in Sekiro.
Genichiro is my personal favorite character in the game for a number of reasons. He's got the coolest character design, is the coolest character in general, and the fight is amazing. He's a perfect foil to Sekiro, a fellow orphan of war taken in by a master of killing and made into a lethal weapon because of it. Honestly, I'm not even sure why you're fighting him. The guy just wants to save his country and people from the dickheads in the ministry. It's not like it's even that bad for Crow to give him immortality. Worst case scenario, someone can just beat his ass with a mortal blade or something. He's like the Eren Yeager of Ashina, really. The fight we ranked here is the main one at the top of Ashina Castle, but it's cool to note that he's one of those awesome cases where you fight the same character multiple times. I'm a sucker for that trope, what can I say? It's always Kino, every time. The thing I love so much about this fight is that it's a balance of the two things I love the most about the combat of this game. There are two kinds of attacks in my eyes, deflects and meat shots. For the most part, each boss is firmly in one camp or the other. Both are satisfying but in different ways. The Guardian Ape and Demon of Hatred are meat shot fights. Sword Saint Ishin is a deflect fest, that sort of thing. What Genichiro does really well is balancing both of these, which makes both kinds of blows far more satisfying due to them being juxtaposed with one another. When you fight a deflect spammer boss, you're thinking, okay, just barely holding this guy off. You know, when you fight a meat shot boss, you're thinking, okay, just whacking this guy. With Genichiro, meat shots have me like, ah, sweet, he's vulnerable, I can beat his ass. And deflects make me go, awesome, I'm wearing him down. Sort of hard to put to words, but I find this mixture really satisfying. Instead of getting his animations interrupted by your attacks and then blocking automatically after 2 or so hits, you can whack him still, but he just continues going on and hits you anyways if you don't stop spamming. He has opportunities for both Mariki counters and footstooling, which are great mechanics that feel gratifying to pull off every time. The last phase introduces the lightning counter ability, which is another incredible addition to some battles, although it does trivialize the fight as a result. While the fight is unfortunately trivial to anyone with passing skill at the game, with most of my fights ending in less than 90 seconds, it's an amazing roadblock for new players and stands as one of the best designed fights in all of Sekiro regardless.
I think beating Ishin in 2 tries may be my proudest tug. I can't really put into words how eviscerating it felt to absolutely manhandle the old chap. I genuinely entered a mental zone of gaming focus I haven't been in since I first tried the Laron Dark Beast like 4 years ago. I was actually so fucking excited that I dropped my DualShock controller on the ground, and it's actually busted as shit now. Whenever I play online games with my friends, my microphone just makes a popping noise, and anytime I scream it, like, cuts out. So anyways, saying Ishin the Sword Saint is rewarding would be the understatement of the century. He's arguably the hardest boss fight of any made by FromSoft. I'd say no question it's more difficult than the Orphan of Kos for me, but Malenia still remains the only boss in a Souls game I've yet to defeat. And she's a shit boss too, by the way. Expect an Elden Ring re-ranking eventually. Ishin is quite literally Malenia's inverse though. He's ridiculously hard, but completely fair all the while, and this fair difficulty is what makes him so exciting to overcome. Ishin is actually a 4-phase boss, beginning first with Genichiro. Since we've already been through that, let's get to the cutscene.
Washi wa kono Ashina o yomigaera ne ba naranu. Yue ni Sekiro. Onushi o kiru.
Aw yeah. From the body of his grandson, Ishin Ashina emerges, a younger, more primed version of the dying founder of the Ashina clan, resurrected through Genichiro stabbing himself with the Black Mortal Blade. Ishin's first phase is entirely fought with a sword, and is similar in a lot of ways to the Ishin Ashina fight in the Shura ending, except without fire and a bit faster overall. Reflecting then countering with offense is the easiest way to beat Ishin, and I'd even go as far to say as this phase is pretty no damageable with enough practice. Phase 2 is when shit gets mental. Ishin reveals a gigantic halberd and a gun, all of which he uses. On my victorious second attempt, this phase drained me of 9 healing gourds just due to the speed and aggression Ishin has. I'd still recommend being aggressive offensively, as at least for me it keeps me a bit more engaged and in turn ready to time a counter. The halberd is also open to the Mariki counter, but this is still where the fight becomes sort of over the top hard. The last phase is absolutely fucking crazy, however. Just when you think it can't get harder, Ishin summons lightning from the heavens, and this becomes a direct part of his moveset. Although I won't even lie, I managed to beat this thing with no healing gourds just because the lightning reversal does so much posture damage. It only took 2 of those, plus admittedly Zen state focus for about a minute, and then I saw the most sexually arousing text I've ever received. Well done, Sekiro. Ishin the Sword Saint is one of my favorite bosses in the FromSoft lineup, and due to his difficulty, rewarding defeat, and overall character arc, is a deserving runner-up for best boss in Sekiro.
If I wanted to best explain why I love this fight so much in one sentence, I'd say he has similar pluses to the fight with Genichiro, except he isn't fodder. This fight is leagues more fun than the first Owl fight to me, partly because he no longer does annoying bullshit like tossing poison and blocking your heals. Instead, he is much more focused on swordplay, with the only trick he busts out being the very counterable fireworks. You still get the feeling of fighting a fellow scumbag shinobi who leaves honor at the door, but not at the expense of fun. The meat shot to deflect ratio is perfect here, and every move is both fairly telegraphed and counterable. He has some cool specialties, such as changing his Ichimonji into an upward slash if you start dodging early like a sucker, which definitely got me once or twice. Great way to subvert the obvious flaws with the move I ribbed on earlier. His second phase is great. It's similar enough to the first one to not be totally frustrating learning a new moveset, but changes enough to be hype-worthy when you get there. Owl is easy to get behind and hack away at, which is great, but he has the health to back it up, which is one easy change they could make to Genichiro that would make him a bit more formidable. It also all takes place in the same arena as Lady Butterfly's fight, which, as I mentioned, is my favorite arena in the game, between the flames and the giant Buddha statue looming at the end of the hall. The context behind the fight is cool also. Fighting already powerful characters in their prime is another awesome concept that isn't done enough in my opinion. I remember when the Godhome DLC for Hollow Knight added the Pure Vessel fight, that was like the coolest shit ever, and this is a similar thing. This game is even kind enough to confirm to you in the memory item description that he is indeed in his prime here, in case you were worried that he was still dulled by his age in this encounter. It's a shame the Owl Father fight is hidden to the point that I totally missed it on my original playthrough, because it is, despite close competition from the Sword Saint, the best boss in Sekiro.
Thank you so much to our patrons, not just for their continuous support, but taking part in our bi-monthly poll and choosing Sekiro as our game to play. If you'd like to, feel free to check out our Patreon linked in the description below, and should you join, you can participate in the polls too. One more time, thank you to Jack Allen, Aaron Charong, Tintanibulations, Not a Charge Shot, and Chelsea White. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't, and otherwise be sure to check in every week for new uploads. That's all for now. Deuces.